All right. Am I? All right. Audio is there. Do. Waiting for Reverend Bill. 11:56. Supposed to meet at 12. Do. Communal living. I actually like the idea of communal living. As long as I don't have to live with Forbes. I thought he was a jerk. Creepy. He's creepy. Brandon seems nice enough. I like Brandon. Forbes, creep. I like Forbes. He's a good egg. He's a good egg. Nice dude. I like Luke Beardslee. That's Reverend Bill's son that I know. He was best man at my wedding. Reverend Bill did the wedding himself. I have no mail. Nobody loves me. I used to in college, when my parents would not send me emails or anyone, I used to just send myself emails like, hey, buddy, you're doing great. You're a good egg. Didn't help. Did not help in the least. Housing. It's a crisis in California. It's expensive. You know why it's expensive, though? Because so many people want to live here. The weather's great. And here is Reverend Bill. Let's see. And away we go. Reverend
Hi,
Bill,
Bill.
great to see you. How are you?
I'm well, and you?
I am well myself. We just bought this house that we've been renting for like 7 years out in California. We love it. We very happy.
Great.
Yeah. I was just saying to myself, I talked before my interviews. I was like, the thing you look for in a house when you're a parent is the school district. And I was wondering, if you made all the schools equal, it would be such a great boon for the economy, and people would be like, oh my gosh, this neighborhood a little rough around the edges, but heck, they got a great school district.
Yeah, that would take a major revamping of educational policy in this country for that to happen.
Oh, it sure would. It's well, I don't know if you know this. So this podcast is called Last Exit on the Left, and I support like the balkanization of America, where the West Coast can become its own country, New England could become its own country, or even the idea of just decentralized government. Because yeah, it is. I mean, New England I consider, somewhat progressive. Same with the West Coast, but like I find it like we're held back a lot by a lot of like Texas and a lot of those red states when it comes to like education and just general reform and like I looked at the statistic. California's population, for red states to create a filibuster, the senators they need have less of a population than California. So like,
gosh.
yeah. Wow. So it's like any time that any like, not that there's ever been a bold reform in my lifetime, but even if there was, it would get filibustered by the Dakotas, Wyoming, Alabama, and Mississippi, and a few other states. So it's frustrating. I don't even know what to do to solve the country's problems. Like at this point, I've just given up, and I'm like, I'm going to focus on California and try to make the changes I can locally. I believe, I forget who said it, but local politics is the key to any revolution or movement, is to focus local. And
there was a saying in the 60s, think globally, act locally.
Yeah. So yeah, the episode, I'm doing a podcast tomorrow. We're talking about the housing crisis in general on the West Coast. So this is just kind of an added bonus of communal living, something I will be honest with, I've been interested in probably for a long time. And I know that you are an expert on it. Can you give me and the people who are going to be watching this your background on communal living?
Yes. I, as you know, am a United Church of Christ minister. And when I was in seminary, I was very involved in what was going on in Central and South America and United States policy there, interventionist policy, and fighting that. And there grew up within particularly religious communities, Christian communities, what they called the community, the base community movement. And it was a self-empowerment kind of thing where the poor were coming together with those that were allies to form community and create their own infrastructure, their own pockets of resistance, whatever it happened to be. And it was very very powerful as a dominant white male reformist radical Christian to see this happening. And a group of us became very interested in forming community here. And so we started talking together, and another couple and us were in the midst of these discussions. And there was actually two other couples, and we all decided that we were gonna get a place and kind of live into this experiment. That summer, Lisa and I we had jobs at the Grand Canyon in Arizona. Lisa being my wife. And I drove out, I'm not California. Did I say California?
It's in Arizona.
Arizona, yeah, the Grand Canyon, Arizona. So I drove out, and she was going to fly out, and because she was going to move our measly possessions from our one-room apartment into this house that we were going to share with these other couples. And she got out to the Grand Canyon, and to make a very long story short, she told me that we were having our first child. We didn't know that when I left, and that's the news that she greeted me with. And that was Luke. And the reason I even bring that up was because one of the three couples was not comfortable with having children in our community. So this put us back to square one. And to make a very long story short, the other couple still wanted to do community with, including us. And if the other couple didn't want to do it, then we were going to part ways. So we parted ways. We ended up founding a community that we called Centerpiece, P-E-A-C-E. And our vision was to simplify our lifestyles, to share resources, to engage in social justice together, and see where it went. And so we did that, and it was the beginning of a very long-term commitment to living in community. Fast forward, I think it was 3 years we were there, and an opportunity arose for us to explore the possibility of living in the country, which is where my heart was, and live on a farm and start an organic farm that was committed not only to peace and justice work, but to living communally, sharing resources, and growing organic vegetables for soup kitchens and shelters, as well as for our own use. And so we moved from the city to the country and formed Noonday Farm with the three of us and another couple and their 2 children and 2 individuals. And it was modeled on the Catholic worker movement. Dorothy Day and Peter Morin were these two radical Catholic Christians, and they had a vision about Dorothy and Peter had established soup kitchens and shelters in New York City. And they had this vision that there should be agrarian communities associated with the city endeavors. And so Catholic worker farms started to evolve around some of the city communities, you know, within a reasonable distance from the city communities, so that where Peter Morin had this thing, he said, where the farmers become intellectuals and the intellectuals become farmers. He had this whole idea of people becoming more equal within this structure. So there's a whole history to it, and those communities are still very alive. And so that is where Silas was born, my second son, and where our eventual daughter, we adopted another child, Amber. I don't know if you ever met her.
I've seen pictures, and Luke speaks so highly of her.
Yeah, and then Jim and Louise had another child, and then the two individuals eventually left, and another family. In fact, the guy that we lived with in the first community, he and his wife got divorced, and he remarried somebody else, and they asked if they could come and live on the farm. And they had 2 kids while we were at the farm. So we were now 3 families, and we also had 2 rooms on the farm to provide hospitality for homeless people. So and we were there. I forget how many years, but quite years, and we ended up leaving there when there were some issues that demanded family issues that demanded our attention that couldn't be remedied in community. So we left community and became a nuclear family for the first time in about 14 years. And we never lived as a nuclear family with children. We only had children within the context of community. So it was a traumatic experience to leave it. It really was. But ask me more questions. You had this.
Yeah. So one thing that you brought up that was really interesting to me. So in California, one of the problems that we have, I guess it's a problem everywhere, is mega farms. And the idea that my uncle was a farmer in Vermont. It was a multi-generational farm. The small farmer is dying. It's a dying breed. It's now these huge mega farms that are not eco-friendly. They mass produce. There's no it's soulless. So I was just going to add on to that. How do you think communal living could help the small farmer and like create that culture again that America has lost of, you know, the small farmer and self-sustainability?
That's a big question. From the perspective of community and a communal farm, when you pool resources together, it eliminates a huge financial burden if you can find a way to do that. And it gives you more time and space for the communal farming, for doing things that are an adjunct to that. You know, like when we were at Noonday Farm, we were involved in a lot of anti-nuclear activity, still Central South America work and anti-apartheid activity. Some of us were getting arrested And we had the freedom to do that because we had an infrastructure around us that allowed us to engage in that social political activity as well as the sustainable farming activity. We still had to have money coming in, but we figured out, there was a whole way we figured out how to do that. So I think it's, this whole idea of think globally, act locally is in California and elsewhere around the country, this is already happening. There's a couple of Catholic worker farms in California that, they're more focused, they're not focused on necessarily making a living off of it, but it's allowing people to build infrastructures that are sustainable and of assistance to the wider community. I think that the idea of it can be extrapolated into bigger farms based in community that are producing food locally. And the Cheshire County area in Keene is a fine example. We don't live there anymore, we moved, but we have a co-op that allows farmers to, sell their produce and their chicken, their eggs, their beef, whatever, sustainably raised, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a looser definition of community, but it allows the farmers to have local places that they can sell their produce, whatever it may be, and make a living off of it. Plus there's their local farmers market every week and through the winter. And so this is both the impact on the environment, the economy, and the sense of community in all of that is extraordinary. And that's happening big time in California.
I will tell you, as a person, my family loves farmers markets, and they bring the community together like nothing I've ever seen. It's that fun family night where you go, there's a local band playing, you have all sorts of diverse food trucks there. You have local produce. You get to meet the small business owner. It is a wonderful thing. And I was going to ask you, clearly we both are aware that this country is very divided, politically, socially. COVID has really shown that more than anything. But how is it, even just stress-wise or for your happiness, living in a community, a commune, whatever you call it, where everyone has shared goals and ideals?
Well, let me say, first of all, it's very intense. And at the same time, very liberating. Now, we chose in both instances to live in communities with other people. There are a lot of different models for this. The thing that Silas is doing, they're going to have, I think there's 15 or 20 acres of land, and they're going to have individual living, kind of like a village. And they'll, I think there's going to be 5 homes and a community center. They're going to do sustainable farming on the land there. And that eliminates a level of stress that we might have experienced because we were flying by the seat of our pants. We had at least one community meeting a week. We made our decisions by consensus. We shared always our evening meals together, and sometimes our lunch, because most of us worked on the farm. So a big bell would ring meal would be prepared by volunteers any particular day. We'd come in and we would have our lunch together. And we would read a book while we were eating that was accessible to the children. So it was this beautiful, like, little gathering every day at lunchtime, and then our big meal at night with everybody, including the homeless guys who were living there. So, because we were doing that, because we were in the same space, there were multiple challenges along the way. But after we left, I realized that compared to what we left and had to go into, I would take that any day over living as a nuclear family. But we had to live as a nuclear family. And now in my dotage, Lisa and I are living in community again. But we have our own separate living quarters. The other couple has their own living quarters, and we're going to do a lot of stuff together. So the benefits from it, some of it is, at that time it was having shared childcare, social interaction. It provided the meals, the work, and it provided those of us, well, at this point that I'm talking about, we were all parents, and you know how hard it is to get away.
Oh, yes.
In
Yes.
community, the children trusted all the adults, and we had what we called couples night. And every week, every couple got to go out.
Oh, that's
and
beautiful.
the kids were taken care of and put to bed, and and then we got back after it. I mean, it took the kids a little bit to get comfortable with that, but they loved it, because they loved the people that they were living with. And on top of that, because we had a spiritual dimension to everything that we were doing, most of us would take at least 1 week-long silent retreat a year. And while one partner in a couple was gone, the other partner had this built-in infrastructure to help take care of the children. I mean, it was so enriching in that regard. And it allowed us to engage in a lot of stuff together. Yeah.
Having told you before that we bought a house, my wife and our goal would be a communal living with other parents with special needs children. Just for that reason, we're so fortunate now that my in-laws live 10 minutes away, so we have that infrastructure. But raising a special needs kid, they say 80% of special need couples end up divorcing just from the stress of it. And it's, you can be a great parent, but then there's special needs. It's completely different. I was gonna just get your opinion on this with technology getting so good. So my wife, Jen, who she does very well career-wise, makes good money, and she's been working at home now since COVID and until at least August. I see potential for communal living where you have maybe that one person who makes really good money working at home who can provide that financial structure for a community where everyone else can start doing all those other things, the farming, the helping with children. You could start building these micro communities that could really thrive. So I'm actually excited with technology and people being able to work from home, moving to rural areas. This could be a really exciting time for communal living or just families in general.
All right. I agree. I think it's taking the best of what technology is and utilizing it for a greater purpose. And, and again, there are so many models for this. And ability to telecommute is, I mean, it's revolutionary. It's changing. This is one of the things that COVID is, the repercussions of COVID is going to change forever, is the way we work. The way some of us work. There are different models. You know, there's a co-housing model of community where, like in Cambridge, I'm aware of a community there where a group got together, pooled their financial resources, and they built an apartment complex. And you buy, like a condo, you buy into your living space. That's yours to do with what you want to, but the land is held in trust. And in that community, they have a couple of places where guests can come. They have another section of it where elderly people can come to live out their last years. So the co-housing model, it has been going on for a long time, and that, you know, that's another option. Within the Waldorf education movement, there's this thing called Camp Hill, which is farming communities where families and individuals and people with special needs live in community together. And they have craft workshops, they work the farm, and create an environment that is totally open and loving and embracing and inclusive of all the people that live there. They don't separate out people with special needs. They all live, you know, if there are individuals, they have living space that's shared. If it's a family who has a special need, they have their living space. But everybody works together, you know, and they do this thing. There's also in France, the marsh communities. I don't know if you ever heard of those.
I've heard of, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's another model where they come together and they live together, no matter what their abilities or disabilities are. And, you know, it's a communal endeavor and sense of wholeness and sustainability that evolves in some of them.
Well, now, one of my favorite communal places, have you ever heard of a place called the City of 10,000 Buddhas?
No.
So in California, up in Mendocino County, Ukiah, this really, I think it's the county seat, 10,000 people, biggest city in Mendocino. But there used to be in the 1950s a state hospital, this large campus, and it went under. And Buddhists bought it, and they built this whole town that you can go, and it's beautiful. They have a community center. They have their own private school that teaches, you know, Buddhism. One of the best schools in the country, ironically. They win all sorts of awards for like music competitions, like academia, what have you. They have this amazing vegan restaurant that we go to every time we go up through Humboldt County. And it's this massive where like peacocks roam the streets. It's just this beautiful place. And it's just kind of, when you were talking about all these different types of communal living, it's not just one. I'd be interested to see, with COVID, there's going to be a lot of opportunities, like hotels are going out of business, like all these places, especially in cities, these retail spaces that are just gone under. It would be interesting to see if the government, I doubt they would, but like to give tax incentives for people in urban areas to have these communities, like you were saying in Cambridge, because I'll tell you, the California National Party, that's part of our platform for environmental sustainability, is to put affordable housing in urban areas where, you know, it's more eco-friendly. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunities here with communal living. And like I said, my main thing, with everyone's so divided, having a place where you can live with like-minded people or that share a common thing can be a really good thing. It might alleviate a lot of stress for people. It's 12:30. I've held you for an extra 10 minutes than I
I,
promised.
it's up to you.
Oh, all right. I'll keep going. I always, when I do interviews, I always try to stick to the time unless they say
Yep.
otherwise. What was I gonna ask? Are there resources that are just like nonprofits or organizations that help people set up communal livings? Because this strikes me, I mean, you're talking your story. It seemed like you didn't have any guidance at first really to set this up. Are there groups that help other groups set up communal living?
Well, I think that's the key. I mean, I said, yeah, we did what we did, but one of the first things we did when we were still in the first community was to find other people that were living in community in Boston and the greater Boston area. And we established an ad hoc group that we just named the Community of Communities Group. So we would get together and we'd kibitz back and forth about living in community, about social justice work. Sometimes we would have themed discussions, so we were relying on each other in our extended communities to help us with our individual communities. I don't know of, I meant to bring a book up with me, and if you can wait, I'll go get it in a little bit. Because
I
I do
certainly
want to,
can. Yes.
yeah, I want to use it as for reference for you. But I think the title of the book might be Community of Communities or something like that. But it's all kinds of resources about different kinds of communities, people to get in touch with, places to visit, research that you can do to establish it. And one other thing I wanted to mention that you triggered for me was, our farm was purchased from a donation that somebody had made to the Catholic worker house in Boston called Haley House, which was a soup kitchen and shelter. Right?
Luke spent a summer there, right?
Yes, he did.
Oh,
That's right.
My friend Ryan and I hung out, and I think we served lunch with Luke, and we hung out
Oh,
that
okay.
night. One of the top, I'll say, I've had a lot of great experiences, but one of the top 100 experiences in my life. It was, the people there were so nice. It was such a beautiful, like Luke was so lucky to live in this beautiful area of the city. It was, and what was my favorite thing that I remember the most was Luke knew all the homeless people. He actually, like, he had this open relationship with them where he could just ask them how their day was going. And I think that something like that for a homeless person, like having a person humanize them and care about them, is a great way to get them out, get them to be in a better situation. So yeah, that Haley House is a beautiful thing. I absolutely, I adored it.
Well, so because the Catholic worker movement had this idea of establishing farms, somebody donated the money solely for the purchase of a farm. And so that's how it was able to be financed. The initial purchase of it was from that gifted money, and then we ran it from there. But the other thing that they did, and they had been around since 1967, I think, was the city of Boston had, you're talking about all these buildings that are going to be vacant. The city of Boston had numerous vacant buildings that were owned by the Housing and Urban Development, in Boston, authority in Boston. And Haley House decided to approach them and ask if they could purchase for $1 one of these buildings to establish housing for poor and homeless elderly. And they did it. And they refurbished it. And they were able to, this was right down the road from Haley House. So that was the first one that they did. In over the years, they ended up purchasing, I think it was 3 other HUD properties. One was for women and young children, homeless women and young children. Another one was for families. And I forget about the third one. But it was not only, it wasn't like, yeah, come and live here. It was, they established these places so that people could get on their feet. They would hire homeless people to manage the properties. They would hire homeless people to, do maintenance. They would, and they actually were able to get another building that they converted into a bakery and a cafe.
That's
and it was an extraordinary accomplishment for them to be able to do this. And the city made it possible by making these vacant properties available for them. So anything's possible. I don't know what it's like out there and who owns what or whatever, but they're probably hoping for a renaissance in development, and I'm hoping that we reframe our whole approach to what's going on here and come up like what you're talking about with alternative ways to deal with the economic hardship and with housing and all of that, because there's no end to the possibilities if imagination is brought to it.
I will tell you the problem that I see in California is, I'm going to use the term, even though there's other uses for it, NIMBY. Not in my backyard. Like a lot of people in California, especially I'll say San Francisco, oh, we want to help the homeless, we want to help the poor. Oh, we want to refurbish this building to have low-income families live here. Well, no, we don't want that. So that's a problem. That's actually something I'm working on. I live in Fairfield, which is near Napa, in between San Francisco and Sacramento. There is, right by Travis Air Force Base, which is one of the larger Air Force bases in the country, there is a 300 houses that are just vacant. And there is a group of us who want to have that for homeless vets, for first come would be to veterans, homeless or struggling families. And then after, if there's extras, to open it up to other people. But the Air Force Base won't turn on the water or plumbing for those houses because lower the property value of this up and coming neighborhood, because we make the housing in Fairfield, we're getting a lot of like the Oakland and San Francisco people who are getting pushed out, coming to buy houses where we are because it's suburban, it's right off the highway. So that's a real problem. People talk the talk about wanting to help homeless or low income, but they don't want it in their backyard, which is, I think, a shame, because I've a great quote. Someone was, I forget who it was, I think Bergman, the Dutch guy, economic guy. Poverty is not a sign of morality. It's a sign of not having money.
Right. I like that. Yeah.
The other thing I love about communal living, so I think, I worked on the Andrew Yang campaign pretty early on, and one of the talking points they had with universal basic income, because one of the concerns people had with universal basic income, and it's a legitimate concern, landlords are going to just raise your rent, because landlords who rent out properties, any excuse that they have to raise the rent, they're probably going to do it. The idea, if you had a universal basic income, or you could buy a house with another couple, you can have communal living where rather than paying your rent, you save up your money and you buy a fixer-upper and you live there. So I love the idea of communal living for many reasons, but the idea of getting out of the renting. Renting, it's hard to get out of renting once you start, because you're spending so much money on your rent, especially in California. They say people in San Francisco spend 45% of their salary on rent.
Wow.
And that's not good for a community. That's not good for small businesses.
Nor is it good overall in the long run for the economy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, no. So that's one thing I love about the idea of communal living is you can get out from underneath the boot of a rent, being a renter. Um, what are some of the other things that we haven't talked about that you see as benefits for communal living? Is there anything that we haven't discussed?
I don't think so. I just, I think that ultimately it leads to a sense of cooperation, collaboration, sustainability for the greater good. It can minimize, if it's done with great intention, it can minimize the ecological footprint when you're sharing resources, when you're invested as a community in recycling and reusing and all of that. And it can enlarge the sense of local and global community, which we need.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's the umbrella of all of this stuff that we've been talking about. But the collaboration and cooperation thing, I think, is huge. We're so fractured right now, and if you can get a group of people that are interested in any kind of cooperative, communal, collaborative living, it will change that dynamic. It will shift that dynamic. When people take care of each other, you provide. I mean, there are communities that have popped up around the country for elderly people where they can come and live out securely the last years of their lives. There's like this Camp Hill movement that welcomes peoples with different abilities. I don't know. There's just a host of things and impacts from this way of living, which comes from a certain way of thinking and relating, which is critical also. And I could regale you with stories of things that took place over the years that we lived in community. We were in this little rural town of Winchendon, Massachusetts. And it was as though the world came to us. At any one time during the week, we might have around our table people who knew about this commune and the Catholic worker. Like one guy, a German guy, who came to visit us right after the wall went down, and he gave us a piece of the wall.
That's so cool.
Jim, who had been, he had done international nutrition work for many years. So he had this wide network of, we got connected with people in South Africa, in Bangladesh, in southern India. We would host weekend getaways for homeless people.
So
we would turn the whole farmhouse into kind of like a homeless hotel, and the whole idea was to get them to come out into nature, get out of the city, come into nature. Very few of them wanted to sleep outside, and the main reason, it was too loud. So anyway, the benefits and the mutual benefits, it was a benefit to us. A couple of times we had women who needed shelter from abuse that came and stayed with us for a little while. We had music. We had a singing group, did a recording at one point to raise money for the soup kitchen and also for the anti-apartheid struggle. The joys and the benefits far outweighed whatever struggle there was for me.
Well, you brought up art. That made me think of a place our old stomping ground, the McDowell Colony.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm a firm believer that art is the inspiration for science, and all future development and all the progress in the world. So like, yeah, you can have art communities, you can have all sorts of, I mean, the options are just limitless. I was going to ask, are there any politicians in America that that are active in supporting communal living? Is there any legislation or any tax break ideas or anything like that that promotes this?
not that I'm aware of.
Oh, that is so
That that
disappointing.
that's that's too much tickling the belly of the beast. You follow the money. The money's not in communal living.
Which is,
Uh, yeah, I think we're going to see some interesting changes with what's her name, who just got appointed to um, the Native American woman.
oh, I know who you're talking
The
about, and now I feel naive. I don't know the
the
name.
Department of the Interior.
Yes.
She is. This is radical. It's going to be very interesting to see. I mean, it's radical that she even got the appointment, and she was in full regalia when she was sworn in, and the karma, if you will, that this nation carries for its genocide against First Peoples is we have not found a way yet to atone for that, and that's got to happen. And there are small things happening here in the United States. There are things happening in other countries, like in Canada and Australia and other places like that, where there's a sense of truth and reconciliation, if you will, to use Bishop Desmond Tutu's model, from South Africa. But our government, because of the system in which we live, I'm afraid that we've got to do it. We've got to figure it out. We've got to find the inner resources and the outer resources to, as Peter Morin said, we have to build the new in the shell of the old.
I was going to say, one of the California National Party at our platform is if we ever gain independence, which we're hoping, knock on wood, that when we take the federal land, we want to put at least half of it towards indigenous and First People, that it will be their land where they can, where they're autonomous. They can still get all of our benefits, but they govern themselves, just because there is so much federal land that Californians don't have control over. So that's part of our plan. And obviously, like, you're absolutely right, but Native Americans have been keeping the communal living, going in this country. Like, they seem to be the experts. And it makes me sad when communal living doesn't have to be a left issue.
Right.
It's a nonpartisan issue that would make everyone's lives better. Like, I don't care if, like, right-wing people, Trump supporters, they want to have their own commune where they live, have at it. Like, they can maybe, they'll learn some sense of community. They'll, more eco-friendly. Like, this is not a Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green Party issue. This is independent of just, hey, we want to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And it's a sad reflection, I think, of our government. The issues like this they'll never get passed, it seems. Like,
right.
Even just something like a tax break for communal living, like more access to mortgage loans, or, to land that's not being used. It's a real shame. It's frustrating. And like you said, it's up to people acting locally to get things going in this country. I like to say I have hope for America, but it gets harder every day. So is there, oh, yes, I interrupted you.
Well, I have hope for human beings that I think I think the changes are subtle and sometimes hard to see, especially if you're only looking globally. I think this gesture of looking locally and acting locally will expand our sense of hope and connectedness, because there's a million things going on everywhere, just everywhere, not the least of which is, in some of the native lands and, in pockets. There's a place in LA, it's called Elderberries Cafe. It's a community within the city. If you're ever there, very interesting place to visit. So this is one of the books. I couldn't find, there were two. I can't find the other one, but it's called Creating a Life Together. I can send you the title and everything. Practical Tools to Grow Eco-Villages and Intentional Communities. And the Dr. Patch Adams?
Yes.
He writes the foreword to this book.
Oh, that's an impressive get.
Yeah. And it's full of ideas and suggestions. I'm going to locate the titles of the other books. There's one actually about Haley House. And then there's another one about a community in it's in Massachusetts. I can't remember the name of I think it's Hardwick, Mass. That's been an intentional community for almost 45 years, that we collaborated with and still see, do stuff with the people there. There's another one in Ipswich, Mass, that takes in refugees and does peace work. That's called the House of Peace. Yeah, and if you Google Camp Hill communities, you'll find Camp Hill communities are everywhere. Just in case, Pete, I don't know how you share references with people, but there's a lot of resources out there for exploring all of this.
It's good to so the California National Party, I would say 80% of us, or 80% of the people, joined when Bernie Sanders got screwed out of the election in 2016. I would say 80% of the people are Bernie Sanders supporters. So I would be remiss not to ask you what it's like to be an opening speaker for Bernie Sanders. What was that experience like?
It was an honor. He is somebody that I've followed his career because he's one of those rare voices that's been able to remain in politics and government with a big measure of integrity. I organized the first, helped organize the first group of Bernie supporters in 2000, for the 2016 election in Keene. And then it just exploded. It was huge. And then as soon as I knew he was running again, I got on that bandwagon again. So locally, I was, with people that were getting this thing going, and they said, "Would you like to introduce him when he comes to Keene?" And I said, "I would love to." So,
did he give you a pat on the back? Was it a good job, Bill? Did he give you? Did you have that moment with him?
We didn't have that moment, but he thanked me, shook my hand, and we had a picture taken. I was supposed to get the whole group of us that were involved in that, and we were supposed to get copies of it, but we never did.
Ah,
I also, supported Kucinich
I remember that.
when he ran, and I actually introduced him in Keene also at the Colonial Theater. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, "How did you people do this?" They were very disorganized.
Yeah. I always find it funny with Kucinich. They always tried to get him. They never went after his policies. They went, oh, the UFO thing. Oh, he saw
Yeah,
UFOs. That was the thing. And now all of a sudden there's like these reports of like alien ships and all, like the government's not confirming. I'm like, well, maybe this guy wasn't as crazy as people in the media tried to make him out to be.
right,
Maybe he was
right.
onto something. No,
Yeah,
I think with Bernie Sanders, to me, his biggest contribution to the world, or I guess to America, is rural progressivism.
yeah,
Like there, for the longest time, I think people thought progressive, Upton Sinclair, the Jungle, and almost the progressive movement or even the independent movement gave up on rural America.
yep.
That's a red state. Him showing that the progressive message, I think it actually fits more in with rural America than it does urban America, believe it or
I
not.
agree. I
And
agree.
that's
Yeah.
one thing. My biggest regret, if I could travel back in time with Bernie Sanders, I'd tell him not to run for Senate. He should have ran for governor. I would have
Mm,
loved to seen him as an executive in Vermont implement all of his policies and show the world that, it could have worked in America. But
mm.
I suppose there's still time. He's healthy enough. Maybe he'll get sick of the Senate and run for governor of Vermont. Um,
We'll see. Yeah.
there's
I really want him in the Senate. And I'm glad he's on the budget committee. Um, that's going to be interesting.
I my hope for him is that he gives Biden a little more hell. I
Yeah.
think I think he has to. I think what I think traumatized him in a sense was how Ralph Nader was ostracized by people after he ran, and they say he affected the Gore Bush election. I don't think he did, but I think he's very polite to a lot of establishment Democrats, where I wish he would hold them to account, because he has such a huge base where he can actually influence things. Like if he wanted to, he could call for a general strike and it would happen tomorrow. So yeah, I would say I was actually encouraged by this latest election between Yang, Gabbard. I know people have issues with, but Marianne Williamson and Sanders. The progressive movement was well represented this time, and progress was made. We'll see. I saw recently Nevada is now like a very progressive establishment. Like they took over the establishment Democratic Party, and even if they're not going to get rid of the Democratic Party, but if they can move them to the left, I think we can see a lot of good progress. So we will see. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, Bill. It's great to see you.